Her voice brought him back. The palace of Almazan rose majestically under the starry desert sky, its golden domes reflecting the moonlight like beacons of hope amid the darkness. But within those walls of white marble and carved stone, a sepulchral silence reigned that contrasted with the architectural magnificence. In the east wing, in the most sumptuous room of the palace, lay motionless Sultan Rashid Al-Zahir, the most beloved and respected ruler the kingdom had known in 3 generations. It had been 6 months since the Sultan had fallen into a deep coma following a mysterious accident during a hunt in the northern mountains. The best doctors in the kingdom and from distant lands had paraded through that room, shaking their heads with regret, pronouncing technical words that no one fully understood, but whose meaning was clear. There was no hope. Royal advisors whispered in the hallways about succession. The kingdom's enemies sharpened their swords at the borders, and the people wept for their fallen leader. But there was someone who refused to accept the doctor's verdict. Layla, a young nurse barely 25 years old, had been assigned to the Sultan's personal care on the recommendation of the royal physician, who had noticed in her an uncommon dedication and tenderness. Layla did not come from nobility. She was the daughter of a humble spice merchant from the central market, but she had studied the art of healing with a wise teacher who had taught her that medicine resided not only in herbs and ointments, but also in spirit and heart. Every morning, when the first rays of sun pierced through the colored stained glass of the Sultan's room, Layla arrived in her impeccable white tunic and sky blue scarf covering her dark hair. With precise and delicate movements, she changed the Sultan's bandages, checked his vital signs, moistened his parched lips, and massaged his extremities to prevent muscle atrophy. But what made her care special were not just these routine medical procedures. Layla sang. From the first day she entered that room and saw the powerful Sultan reduced to a motionless body, she felt a pang in her heart. It wasn't ordinary compassion. It was something deeper, as if her soul recognized in that sleeping man someone important to her destiny. And without thinking, while cleaning his forehead with a damp cloth, she began to hum a song her mother used to sing to her as a child, an ancient desert melody about lost travelers who found their way home, guided by the stars. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, while the palace sank deeper and deeper into despair. The Sultan's room transformed into a sanctuary of music and light. Layla had developed a sacred routine. Each medical procedure was accompanied by a different song. In the mornings, when the sun painted the walls in golden and rosy tones, she sang songs of hope, cheerful melodies that spoke of new beginnings and the victory of light over darkness. Her voice, clear and crystalline like water from a mountain spring, filled every corner of the room, chasing away the shadows. At noon, when the desert heat made even the palace stones sigh, Layla intoned songs of comfort, soft ballads that spoke of maternal love, divine protection, and the peace found in rest. As she sang, she passed her hands over the Sultan's forehead in circular movements, as if she could transfer the serenity of her spirit to his. In the afternoons, when shadows lengthened and the palace was tinged with amber tones, she sang songs of memory, musical tales about heroes of the past, about battles won with honor, about just rulers who had left immortal legacies. She had researched Sultan Rashid's history, had spoken with the palace elders, and had learned that he was a man who deeply loved his people, who had brought prosperity to the kingdom, and who dreamed of a future where all his subjects lived in peace and abundance. And at night, when the moon silvered the desert and the stars shone like diamonds on the black velvet of the sky, Layla sang songs of love. They weren't romantic songs in the conventional sense, but hymns to universal love, to the connection between all souls, to the force that unites humanity. Her voice became more intimate, more vulnerable, as if she were sharing secrets with a dear friend. Layla's dedication did not go unnoticed. The palace servants began to talk about the nurse who sings, and some even stopped in the hallway outside the Sultan's room to listen to those melodies that seemed to have magical power. Some said that Layla's music made the garden plants grow greener, that the birds sang more joyfully, that even the most severe guards smiled without realizing it. But not everyone looked favorably upon Layla's presence. Zara, the Sultan's principal advisor and a woman of dark ambitions, watched with growing suspicion. Zara had been secretly scheming to place her own son on the throne, taking advantage of the Sultan's incapacity. The possibility of Rashid awakening would ruin all her carefully laid plans. One afternoon, Zara entered the Sultan's room with firm steps and a severe expression. Layla was beside the bed, singing softly while adjusting the pillows under the ruler's head. "What do you think you're doing?" Zara asked in a cutting voice. "This is not a theater. The Sultan needs silence and rest, not your peasant songs." Layla turned toward her, unintimidated. Her dark eyes shone with quiet determination. "With all respect, my lady, I have observed that when I sing, the Sultan's vital signs stabilize. His breathing becomes deeper, his pulse more regular. I believe my voice reaches him, even in the darkness where he is trapped." Zara let out a dismissive laugh. "Superstitions of an ignorant girl. The doctors have said there is no hope. You're wasting your time and everyone else's. While there is life, there is hope," Layla responded firmly. "And as long as the Sultan breathes, I will continue singing for him." Zara narrowed her eyes, evaluating the young nurse. There was something in her, an inner strength that the advisor could not break with words. She decided to change tactics. "Very well. Continue with your songs if it makes you feel useful. But when the Sultan finally dies, and believe me, he will, I don't want to hear your laments." And with those poisoned words, Zara left the room, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and malice. 3 more months passed. Winter came to the desert, bringing cold nights and winds that whistled between the palace towers. Layla continued her tireless vigil, singing for the Sultan day after day, night after night. Her family begged her to rest, to accept that she had done everything possible, but she refused. Something inside her told her she must continue, that her mission was not yet complete. One particularly cold night, when the full moon shone with almost supernatural intensity, Layla sat beside the Sultan's bed, more tired than usual. It had been a difficult day. The royal physician had examined Rashid again and had suggested that perhaps it was time to let him go, to allow nature to take its course without interventions. Layla had argued passionately, but she could feel she was losing allies in the palace. With a heavy heart, she began to sing. But this time, her voice broke. The tears she had held back for months finally began to roll down her cheeks. And instead of one of her usual songs, she began to sing something different, something that sprang directly from her soul. It was a song without specific words, an improvised melody that expressed everything she felt: her frustration, her hope, her unwavering faith, her inexplicable connection with that man she cared for. She sang about the injustice of seeing such a noble leader trapped in darkness, about her desperate desire to see him open his eyes, about the love that had grown in her heart without her realizing it, because Layla had fallen in love with the Sultan. not with the powerful man on his throne, not with the feared and respected ruler, but with the soul she had come to know through the stories others told, through the intimate moments of care, through the silent connection that had grown between them during those months of vigil. She had fallen in love with his spirit, with his essence, with the person she sensed beneath that mask of unconsciousness. Her voice rose in the night, more powerful than ever, filling not only the room, but the entire east wing of the palace. The guards in the hallways stopped, moved by the raw emotion in that song. The servants left their tasks to listen. Even Zara, in her distant room, felt a chill run down her spine. And then it happened. Layla had her eyes closed, lost in her song, when she felt a change in the room's atmosphere. It was as if the air itself had become denser, more charged with electricity. Her voice trembled, but she continued singing, though now with open eyes, looking at the Sultan, and she saw it, an almost imperceptible movement in his eyelids. Layla's heart skipped a beat. Had she imagined it? Was it a trick of the moonlight? But no. There it was again, a slight tremor in his dark lashes. Her song became softer, more intimate, as if she were calling him from a very distant place. "Come back," she whispered between the notes. "Come back to us. Come back to me." The Sultan's fingers contracted slightly. Then, with agonizing slowness, as if he were lifting an immense weight, his eyelids began to open. Layla stopped singing abruptly, holding her breath, not daring to believe what she was witnessing. Sultan Rashid Al-Zahir's eyes opened completely. They were a deep amber color, like honey under the sun, and were filled with confusion, with pain, but also with surprising clarity. He blinked several times, as if adjusting to the light, and then his gaze focused on Layla's face. For a moment that seemed to extend through eternity, they looked at each other. Layla could see that he was struggling to understand where he was, what had happened, how much time had passed. But there was something more in his eyes, a recognition that made no logical sense. The Sultan's lips moved, trying to form words. His throat was dry after months of silence, and the sound that emerged was barely a hoarse whisper. Layla leaned closer, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. And then the Sultan spoke. "Layla," he said her name in a voice broken with emotion. Tears began to roll down the powerful ruler's cheeks, furrowing his face like rivers of liberation. They weren't tears of physical pain, but of something much deeper, something Layla couldn't fully comprehend, but felt resonate in her own soul. "Layla," he repeated, and this time his hand moved weakly, searching for hers. The young nurse took his hand in hers, feeling the warmth of his skin, the tangible reality of his awakening. Tears also ran down her face now, tears of joy, of relief, of amazement at the miracle she had just witnessed. "I am here, my Sultan," she whispered. "I am here. You have returned." In the days following the Sultan's awakening, the palace exploded in celebration. Bells rang, flags waved, and the people took to the streets to celebrate the return of their beloved leader. The doctors were perplexed, calling it an unprecedented medical miracle. Zara, for her part, had to hide her disappointment and fury, maintaining a mask of joy while her plans crumbled. But what no one knew, except the Sultan and Layla, was the true nature of what had happened during those 6 months of coma. When Rashid recovered enough strength to speak clearly, he requested a private audience with Layla. The advisors protested, arguing that the Sultan needed rest, but he was inflexible. He wanted to speak with the nurse who had cared for him, and he wanted to do it alone. When they were alone in the room, Rashid took Layla's hands in his and looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. "I need you to understand something," he began in a serious voice. "During all the time I was in a coma, I wasn't completely unconscious. It was like being trapped in a prison of darkness, where I could feel and hear but couldn't move or respond. I was lost in a labyrinth with no exit, sinking deeper and deeper into nothingness." Layla listened with wide eyes, beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had experienced. But then Rashid continued, and his voice softened. "I heard your voice. At first it was just a distant whisper, like the echo of a dream. But each day it became clearer, stronger. Your songs became my anchor, the thread that kept me connected to the world of the living. When you sang about hope, I felt the darkness recede a little. When you sang about love, I felt warmth in my frozen chest." Tears returned to his eyes, and Layla felt her heart expand with an emotion so intense she could barely breathe. "Your voice brought me back, Layla. You literally saved my life, not only with your medical care, but with your spirit, with your unwavering faith, with your love." "How did you know my name?" Layla asked, in a trembling voice. "I never told you while you were in a coma." Rashid smiled, a sad and beautiful smile. "The servants talked about you in the room, thinking I couldn't hear. They spoke of the nurse Layla, who sings for the Sultan. And every time I heard your name, I engraved it in my memory as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Because your name became synonymous with life, with light, with salvation." The following months brought many changes to the kingdom of Almazan. Sultan Rashid, with his health completely restored, resumed his rule with even greater wisdom and compassion than before. His near-death experience had transformed him, making him more aware of life's fragility and the value of each moment. And Layla, the humble nurse who had sung for a sultan in a coma, became something much more important. Rashid, defying conventions and the protests of some conservative advisors, appointed her his personal advisor for health and wellness of the kingdom. But more than that, he opened his heart to her completely. Their love blossomed like desert roses after rain, beautiful and unexpected. It wasn't a love born of sudden passion, but of the deep connection of two souls who had found each other in the most extraordinary circumstances. When the palace slept and the moon shone over the desert, Layla still sang for her husband. But now he was awake to hear her, to join his voice with hers, to create together a new melody that spoke of love, of miracles, and of the unshakable power of the human spirit. Because her voice had brought him back, and now, together, they would create a symphony that would resonate through the generations, a love story that would be told in the kingdom of Almazan for centuries, reminding everyone that sometimes the greatest healing power resides not in medicine, but in unconditional love and faith that refuses to give up. Leave us your comment. Do you believe in the healing power of music? Have you experienced any inexplicable miracle? What song would you sing to save someone you love?